Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. So just before we start, we really want to encourage everyone to introduce yourself in the chat, uh, change your name so that includes your pronouns and your organization if you would like. And if everyone could please grab pen and paper, as we will be doing an activity later on and you will need it for that. That would be great. And yeah, we just hope you have fun in this session and hope you find it interesting. And I'll pass over to Sofie and the rest of the speakers.
Thank you so much, Diana. Hey, everyone, welcome. This was Diana, my lovely colleague from Nourish Scotland. My name is Sofie Quist, and we'll be hosting your session today on local relationships for global climate action, reflections on food and farming at COP26 and COP27. So thanks again for joining us. Well, just to introduce the session briefly, we'll start with an excellent panel that will talk through our experience of participating in COP26 and bringing farmers close to this kind of climate negotiation space. And then the second half of the session will be more interactive and will be led by Diana, who will take us through an activity for which you'll need pen and paper, which you can grab in a bit. So to just kick us off, I'll give a bit of background to what we'll be talking about today. In November, Glasgow hosted the 26th UN climate negotiations, COP26, which is short for the Conference of Parties of the UN Climate Convention. And this is really the decision-making body for the UN Climate Convention, the Paris Agreement, where states have made commitments to address climate change. And that's a really important moment each year for states to ensure that they raise their ambition. I think many of us heard the news, and for people who participated or followed, that didn't really happen in the way we hoped for this year. But it's nonetheless a critical moment to ensure that we move forward. But it's also a really critical time to organize locally and among civil society and to inspire action among different actors who are not states and who are not in the formal part of the COP. And in my own reflection, the level of genuine ambition from states, especially from the large emitters around the world, was extremely disappointing. However, I also, for one, left COP26 in November with a feeling of hope from the activists and from the farmers, from the local governments and others who made it really clear that they're taking climate change very seriously and are not only demanding, but also driving action in whatever spaces they're in. So Nourish Scotland, let me just see if there's anything I should be keeping track of. No, all good. Nourish Scotland had 3 central aims with our participation at COP26 this year. Firstly, to move food systems up the agenda, but not without stressing that when we talk about food and climate, who talks and how they talk matters. And so we wanted to work with others to center the voices of a diversity of farmers at and around COP and make it clear that farmers are not a homogeneous group. There's many types of farmers, there's many realities for farmers. And therefore, a diversity of farmers need to have a seat at the table in food and climate policy when that's decided. And likewise, we wanted to elevate the voices of local governments who are often the leaders on integrated food and climate policies, but also to support local and subnational governments to involve farmers much better in their local policies, and to create a methodology or a way of building trust and collaborative relationships between these 2 actors, cities, local authorities, and farmers. And this is the work that will really be the focus of our session today, because during 2021, we supported some 15 to 20 dialogues between farmers and local authorities around the world for people to come together and talk about food and climate change in their local context. And finally, it was really important for us to support a global movement that marries sustainable food system and climate justice by convening and hosting organizations, farmers, local governments, international friends in Glasgow during the climate negotiations as a local food justice organization. So now we're nearly 2 months on from COP, and we'll dive into these aims and what we took away from the conference and what the path ahead is like shortly with an excellent panel. However, I want to briefly touch on 2 things that we at Nourish see in the path ahead of us, because now isn't the time to table climate change and put that on the shelf just because the UK is no longer hosting COP. In fact, the UK will be president of COP until the next one in Egypt, November next year. And so there's a lot of work to be done domestically to put pressure on the UK government to say, we need to talk about food and farming in these spaces. They need to include food and farming in their own nationally determined contributions, which is the kind of inventory that states do to drive their own ambition and say how they're going to reduce emissions. And so there's work to do to make sure that the voices of farmers and local governments are heard there. And we also have heard that at COP27, we might expect a much stronger focus on food than we had this year, where it was kind of forgotten. But there's work to be done to make sure that the solutions that are then put forward in those conversations are genuine and that farmers' voices are heard, that agroecology, that real farming solutions are represented, and that we don't end up with top-down, one-size-all-fits solutions. So with that small introduction, I'm really pleased to introduce the first speaker that I'll chat to, which is Lina Yassin, who's a master's student at the University of Oxford. She's studying environmental change management. She's also former program manager at Climate Tracker, which is this fantastic organization that supports young journalists to write about climate change. And she's a COP veteran. So she was at COP26 with us, and she's been at COPs in the past before. So hi, Lina. Don't know if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, Sofie. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Really happy to be here.
Excellent. So Lina, you participated in COP in Glasgow with Climate Tracker and covered the negotiations, but also some of the side events on food systems. Would you share what you took away from COP and what do you think that all means for food and farming?
Sure. So I think COPs in general can be quite political. And as you mentioned, most of the times the outcomes are not satisfying at all. So people usually end up walking either disappointed or really angry. And I think overall, if you're an external person who's not really involved in COPs, you might even find them pointless. And I absolutely understand that. But I think COPs are quite critical because if we think about it, COPs do shape our global climate policies, and that includes food and agriculture. So whatever is discussed at COP, whoever is speaking at COP actually matters. And that's why we should not think of them as pointless. I think even though there are not as good as we want them to be, they are still a critical part of our global climate policy. And as someone who's been to many COPs before, I can actually say that COP26 was finally given some attention to food and agriculture. And that was demonstrated through the side events that were being hosted, the experts that were available. There were more conversations about food. There were more conversations about agriculture. I still think it's lacking representation from all groups, but I think in comparison to other COPs, COP26 was actually a movement towards the right place where we want to be when it comes to food conversations. And I also found it really interesting that there were actually events that even tried to explain what is going on on the negotiations level for food and farming and agriculture. There were a couple of events hosted by the FAO trying to explain to people the Colonialism dialogue, joint work for agriculture, why it matters, what is happening. I know that they even supported a team of 6 women experts on agriculture who were participating in different events trying to explain to people why these conversations matters. I'm not saying COP26 did a great job, but I'm saying it's a step ahead from where we were at, and hopefully the next COP and we'll be able to build on this. So I'm trying to be optimistic after all the negativity that we came out from the COP on different aspects of the negotiations.
I think it's really nice to start the year with a bit of optimism.
For sure.
That, Lina. And so you were just mentioning the next COP and what we can expect. And the next COP will be hosted in an African country, in Egypt. And I know you've been close to the negotiators in Sudan before. Do you have any idea of what we can expect in terms of the framing of food conversations when the COP's going to be hosted, not in the UK, but in Egypt next year?
Yeah, I mean, so COP27 is quite important on different levels. On a negotiations level, which is quite technical, COP27 is actually the COP where the outcomes of all the conversations for the Colonialism joint work on agriculture will be discussed, because that did not happen at COP26. Now it's going to happen mid this year. The outcomes will finally be drafted, and then it will actually be presented at COP27 for consideration for adoption. So that is actually a critical moment on a technical level for the agricultural conversations at the UN level. But also on a general level, I think COP27 is going to include more space for food. There's been a lot of calls from NGOs and even the special envoy for the UN Food System Summit did emphasize at COP26 that COP27 has to focus on food. So there might even be a food day at COP27. And I think that would be a major step to finally including food as a critical part of the conversation that should not be ignored at all. And also COP27 is going to be an African COP. We haven't had an African COP in 5 years. And I think finally going there will actually change the dynamic and the priorities that we talk about, because I mean, African farmers struggle the most when it comes to the climate crisis. And I recently knew, and that was from a food event that I went to, that only 2% of the adaptation finance, which is already a low finance, it's not up to the level that we want it to be, but only 2% of it actually goes to farmers, African farmers. So that already shows you that that group is struggling. And I think countries will be pushing. I know my country, and I know Egypt actually is, my country, Sudan is an agricultural dependent country, Egypt as well. So I think we have the right setting where farmers can be included. And I really hope so. I know that this should happen, but I really hope so that COP27 will try to build on what COP26 started. And from there on, we'll only move on to actually having farmers as a default part of the conversation.
Excellent. I forgot to say before that if anyone's got any questions, Lina, I think we'll have time for one question just after this before we move to the other speakers, and then we'll do a Q&A at the very end of the session. So please feel free to just post your questions in the chat, and Ross, our volunteer from Oxford Real Farming Conference, will kind of keep track of them so we can get back to them. But I have one more for you, Lina. So Climate Tracker covered 7 of our Fork to Farm dialogues that took place around the world. And other food sovereignty and agroecology, etc., or events at COP26. And what do you think is significant about these relationships between local actors, both in their place, but also then when you come to COP and make connections with other local actors in different parts of the world?
I think first of all, the local dialogues for us. I mean, for me, I was someone who was trying to coordinate the journalists who were attending the local dialogues. So that got me to also be involved somehow with the local dialogues. And I find them amazing, actually. I think it's not just the fact that you are finally allowing the farmers to be in touch with policymakers, but also just making that space available for others who don't usually consciously think about this issue. And I think for me, I think that was actually a perspective changing experience. And I can confirm that this was also the same for the journalists. And I think this is actually one of the most successful outcomes that we've had of this fellowship for me, is that the journalists, at the start for the journalists, this was just another reporting event that they were assigned to. But then once they got involved, and I can give 2 examples, we had our journalist in Kenya, Hezron, and our journalist in Nigeria, Fidayo. Both of them got really engaged in the local dialogues, and they both told me that for them it changed from just an event that they have to report on to a topic that they're now passionate about, and then they now want to continue writing about because they finally understand the criticality of this issue, but also how that it actually connects with all aspects of our life. And as a journalist, you don't have to be an expert in food. You can write on food, you can include it in all type of stories that you want to write about. And actually just yesterday, I learned that one of our journalists who covered the local dialogue to Nigeria, he won a grant to work on a journalism project. And his project is going to be to train other Nigerian journalists to write on different topics. And he is including food as part of those trainings. So that means we'll have more journalists who are now prepared and trained to write better stories on food. And I think that's a great outcome. So I think these conversations matters, and I think they do make a difference in the way we view the conversation, the food issue, but also it normalizes that issue, and it makes us not think of it as an outside of the box story, or a story that is a second priority. It shows us that it is connected to the problem, it is part of the problem, but it is also part of the solution, and we need to start talking about it. So I'm really glad that this happened, and I really hope that 2022 will only be way more successful than 2021 in terms of the events that we'll be hosting. Thank you.
Thanks, Lina. That was excellent. Are there any questions for Lina just before we move on to the next speakers? No pressure to ask them right now, because we can also get back to them later in the session. And before I introduce the next speakers, I'll just dive in a little bit more. We mentioned the Folk to Farm dialogues. I said about them briefly before, but this was really a project that aimed at taking two actors who are often really far removed from each other, the cities and the farmers, or the local governments and the farmers, but that we know drive a lot of actions and care deeply about climate change often, and try and bring those actors together to try and build trust and try and see what happens when you put local government and farmers in the room together and set the theme being climate change and food. And that took place. That was a very organic process of trying to find out what is the methodology from that, what can we learn from really talented community organizers and facilitators around the world. And so today we've got 3 of those facilitators with us who will talk a bit about their experience of trying to bring together these actors and participate in COP26. And so the first speaker is Abby Mordin, who is the a founding member of Propagate in Scotland and a seasoned food activist. She's been working across community food projects for over 20 years and is passionate about food sovereignty and resilience. And she's an experienced grower, facilitator, practitioner, and researcher. And she's got this collaborative attitude, which really encourages everyone to get involved in thinking about co-creating sustainable food systems. And Abby was running a lively Folk to Farm dialogues in southwest of Scotland. Then we have Elujulo Opeyemi, who's joining us from Nigeria. He's the founder of Youth in Agroecology and Restoration Network and has over 7 years of experience in the sustainability sector across different local and international NGOs. He also has a farming background and is a skilled mobilizer and facilitator, and he convened a Folk to Farm dialogue among food and farming stakeholders in Oyo State, Nigeria. And then finally, but not least, we've got Chemukue Wekesa, who's a senior research scientist with the Kenya Forestry Research Institute, where he works on landscape ecology, biodiversity conservation, indigenous food systems, and climate change. And Chemukue has got over 10 years of research experience in indigenous knowledge and traditional farming systems. And he worked with community-based biocultural heritage in the Mikenda community in coastal Kenya, where he coordinated a Folk to Farm dialogue as well. And all 3 of them were at COP26 in Glasgow this past November. So welcome everyone. I think Deanna has been posting some links where you can read more about each of the dialogues in the chat if anyone's interested. And I'm sure all the speakers will be able to share more resources later on as well. So I'll ask of everyone, and I'll maybe let you come in the order I introduced you. So you participated in COP26. How did you feel that the voices of farmers were represented there? What was your experience of actually, how much did we hear from farmers at COP?
I guess you come to me first because you introduced me first. Hi everybody, it's great to be here on what is a wet morning in Scotland. I actually had COVID for most of COP26, so I missed pretty much all of it. I was due to be, talking or kind of presenting in a workshop or event pretty much every day, but they were all fringe events and all organised by civil society. So I was only able to really watch from the sidelines in the end, from away down here in Dumfries and Galloway in southwest Scotland. Yeah, I mean, I think my experience is that it's kind of business as usual, really. We were hearing from sort of big agribusiness in the actual conference itself. And it's difficult to get a balanced view when you're so plugged into the alternative activists and civil society networks, but there was some amazing stuff going on. I mean, the Nourish space, Recipes for Resilience, I did manage to get in there on the first couple of days before I tested positive and had to go home. Yeah, the programme just looks fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And the Land Workers Alliance space over at Civic House had back-to-back agroecology. So you could dip into some really excellent workshops, but also they were hosting a very kind of fluid, open and accessible space for people to kind of come and be creative and just share with each other. It wasn't specifically about like, let's get serious kind of stuff. There was some really great stuff on the official People's Summit, mostly organised by LWA, Olivia Campesina. Again, a couple of things I was meant to be talking at. And then Centre for Human Ecology over at Pearce Institute in Govan. also had a really diverse program, which included lots of stuff around sort of decolonisation and degrowth, but food was very much kind of being mixed into that as well, around land rights and things like that. So yeah, I think there was ample opportunity for people to plug in and hear about really positive and exciting things that were happening in civil society and activist movements, and I guess the kind of grassroots movements of agroecology. But my impression was that really in the conference proper, those voices were lost, really, as leaders kind of outlined.
Thanks, Abby. And maybe I'll throw that over to Elujulo, actually, because Elujulo, you were at COP26 in this official horrible blue zone that had very few windows. What was your experience there of how farmers' voices were represented and food systems conversations were represented?
Thank you, Sofie. And I think Happy already started the discussion in this space, but the lack of inclusivity and the voices of farmers are these spaces where we expected their voices to be heard. There were a lot of restrictions to attending some of these negotiations for observers and other stakeholders, and this, of course, resulted in the lack of the voices of the farmers, which is expected to be heard. The voices were not being heard there. But of course, this I would say some wins were also recorded for farmers. Of course, we like Lina started earlier, that some successes were also recorded in the agriculture and farming space. We saw for the first time agroecology taking its place in the Coronovia negotiation space. And then we saw the representation of forest, of land, of food and nature, and some of these pledges they made. But of course, the challenge is there is the fact that except we have the voices of these farmers being actually represented in these discussions, the policies formulated might not be need-based, might not even deliver us on the set of objectives and the desires of farmers. So that again reiterates the needs for and hope that COP27 would see that the voices of these farmers are actually included, and farmers are actually granted access into the negotiation space where the voices need to be heard. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Elujulo. And Chemukue, you also traveled all the way to Glasgow to participate in COP26 with a colleague and friend of yours. What was your experience of how farmers were represented and food systems, and especially from your perspective, indigenous food systems were represented at COP?
Thank you, Sofie, and I'm happy again to be here to participate in this conference. I think there is some improvement to some extent, but a lot needs to be done to give farmers more voices. And I am saying this improvement because the hybrid nature of COP26 gave us an opportunity even to allow our farmers to participate remotely from their own landscape and demonstrate and show some of the solutions that they are employing to address climate change issues. We also saw more side events, especially the Folk to Farm organized by Nourish Scotland and some other events organized by IFAD. IFAD was also very strong on promoting the voices of small-scale farmers. However, we need to enhance these voices because they are not adequate as it is now. And we could do this by organizing like more events, having more and more side events focusing on smallholder farmers to advocate for their rights, to advocate for their solutions that they are promoting on the ground. I want to see this happen more, like in COP27, where more events are dedicated to small-scale farmers. Moreover, we also need to strengthen like the farmers' movement so that we have a strong movement that can negotiate for more space within the COP setup, moving to COP 20 22. Thank you.
Thanks, Chemukue. I think that's a really important point, this thing about, the collective voice, and that's something we're hoping to achieve by bringing everyone together, from having the local conversations to say, okay, but now we actually have a strong collective voice, which is growing. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of sun in my face. I'm going to shift a little bit. But Abby, zooming out from the big COP spaces and back to the local dialogues that you all run. Abby, could you tell us a bit about the dialogue you ran in southwest of Scotland? Who did you involve? What did you do? What was the aim?
Lucky you getting sun in your face. It's teeming with rain down here. So yeah, so as I said, I live in Dumfries and Galloway, which is a wee corner of southwest Scotland. Also included in southwest Scotland are South Ayrshire and East Ayrshire. So we're kind of a bit of Scotland that nobody ever really comes to, because if you're going up to the motorway towards Central Belt, Glasgow, and Edinburgh, you go past us. We're off to the west. So you've got to come here. But you should come here because it's beautiful and it's got a rich farming history. It's predominantly beef, dairy, and sheep farming, with very little vegetable production in this region. Although anecdotally there is a history of vegetable production. There used to be a major train line that ran from Dumfries to Stranraer. Allegedly there was market gardens and vegetable farms all the way along that route. And those trains took the produce to the farms, to the markets in London and Glasgow. I keep hearing about pineapples being grown just up the road. Like, what? That's amazing. But now, as I say, it's mostly beef cattle and sheep farming. So we aimed to kind of pull together farmers who were kind of obviously, I guess, in mainstream media and in sort of activist movements, vegan activist movements, particularly in the UK, it's these farmers that are getting the finger pointed at them. They're feeling a lot of the blame and burden being put on their shoulders. It's like cows are the problem, so it's all your fault kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of antagonism between different groups that kind of needs to be addressed, and that's an ongoing process. But we really wanted to sort of engage with farmers on that level and look at the issues that we're facing the farming community in this part of the country and go, okay, if our livestock agriculture systems are contributing to climate change, which I mean they are, then what are some of the big issues facing us, and how can we collaborate together to address those? And as you said, this is also about engaging local governments. So we reached out to the local councils, local authorities, so Dumfries and Galloway, South Ayrshire and East Ayrshire, and other kind of public bodies that are relevant across this region as well. And it sort of it sends an open invitation to anybody, from farmers to public bodies, to get involved if they felt moved to do so. And we had a tremendous response. We had about 50 people at the first session. COVID, obviously, we kind of kept everything online between March and August. So we had monthly meetings where we kind of delved into first of all, we kind of did a sort of light skim over the issues, what are the kind of things that people are thinking about, pulled out some hot topics, dived did a deeper dive into some of those topics in the kind of the next few sessions over the next few months, and then joyfully in August we actually managed to have some in real life farm tours, farm walks. So we went to an organic dairy farm down here in Auchencairn on the coast, and a vegetable farm up by Garduno in Ayrshire, and just that opportunities to kind of get together to sort of vision for the future. We actually had sort of got the farmers to go through a bit of a visioning session, like what do you want our food and farming systems to look like in 2045, and we created this amazing agroecological jigsaw on the back of that, which I could talk more about, but I won't just now. I think the dynamic shifted quite a lot at that point, that kind of opportunities to actually meet in person, connect, to sort of share ideas and to see in real life stuff happening. People got very excited. So it was very positive experience. And for me personally, being part of a global network as well was very exciting. You know, I didn't make it along to as many of the sort of global practitioner sessions as I would have liked to have done. But just knowing that there were other parallel dialogues happening in other parts of the world, from Kenya to Mexico to Indonesia, talking about different issues, but with a similar kind of sort of aim in mind to make these connections. And that was very exciting and really lovely to be part of.
Thanks, Abby. Excellent. And I'll come back with a few more questions about your dialogue in a minute. But if I can pass it over to Elujulo. You ran a dialogue in Oyo State, Nigeria. Who did you involve, and what were you trying to do?
Okay. Thank you, Sofie. I think I'll start by stating the primary objective of our dialogue, which was solely to create a platform for relationships to be built, partnerships to be made, and also for people to share experiences on best practices, and also for the voices of the farmers to be heard where it matters, which is the policy formulation in terms of food and farming as well. So, and this informed the people we invited for the dialogue, the stakeholders. The dialogue actually had spanned from February or through the month of October with different consultations with farmers at the community level, and also bringing together the diverse stakeholders involved in food and farming space in your state together for this constructive dialogue. And of course, we engaged the farmers. Your state did the land. Majority of the farmers are crop producers, and they formed the majority of the people that participated in the folk farm dialogue. Of course, we had the fish farmers in places where we had the livestock farmers. We had representatives of the State Minister of Agriculture, the Federal Minister of Agriculture Office in Nigeria. We had the House Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development, who are in charge, so you're formulating policies and making decisions, touching interventions in terms of farmers, food and farming sectors. We had research organizations, we had crop seed companies, we had young people also being a part of this dialogue. And the reason why we had these people is because we understand the essence of this dialogue to provide platforms for aligning solutions with the problem when the voices, when the right set of people are brought together to discuss moving forward. And again, this informed the people we invited to the dialogue. And of course, we had visits to organic farms, visits to the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture in Nigeria to see how some of these best practices, best agricultural practices in the regenerative space are actually being done. And it was a lot of excitement for the farmers. And of course, for the first time in your state, the voices of the farmers seems to be represented where it matters, because this dialogue is not what we've seen happen before. And so hosting the dialogue was really a timely intervention for the farmers to start strengthening the collaboration that has to come to be between farmers and also the city representatives. We are really talking about achieving a just transition in the way we currently grow and consume our food. These voices need to come together and see how we can collaboratively work together. And that was what we aimed to achieve with that dialogue, and that was what we did. Yeah, back to you, Sofie.
Thanks, Elujulo. I'll follow up directly, actually, because you managed to bring together so many different people, and a lot of them will be, busy, have their own priorities, have a lot going on. Climate change may not be the first thing that's on their mind. As a facilitator, how did you actually get people together? How did you get the farmers engaged? How did you get the city engaged? Is there anything that really worked for you?
Yes, thank you again, Sofie. Yeah, a lot of things actually worked. For one, being the established relationships we already have with these farmers, and also leveraging on our networks to invite the farmers and the city representatives, meeting with them individually, proud to bringing them together to intimate them about what the project is aimed at, what the project was set to achieve. And this really worked for us, because this relationship was not there before, owing to the disappointment from the cities to the farmers. So them coming together was a bit of a challenge at the start, but working with the farmers, meeting with them, going to their community to discuss what we aim to achieve with them, sort of started off the relationship, and continuous engagement strengthened it, which when we invited them, it was an easy invite for them, and they also acknowledged our invitation, and particularly from the aspect of getting them to talk about climate change, to listen about the impact, the relatedness between agriculture and climate change. Of course, in Nigeria, for one, where agriculture is still largely rain-fed, so the backdrops of climate change is what these farmers experience on a daily basis. So what we did wasn't to start talking about the science of climate change with them. We weren't talking with them about the number of the gigatons of the tons of CO2 agriculture is emitting. We approached it from what they are experiencing on a daily basis. Of course, they are also in the know of the late onset of rainfall and the early cessation of this rainfall. They are also familiar with the locust infestation in East Africa and how it's affected agriculture. So what we did was just speak with them in terms of what they are experiencing on a daily basis. And from there, they were happy to listen and to talk in terms of some of the best practices like agroecology, organic farming, and the likes. Of course, we had some farmers who are already into these farming practices, and also they came as a storyteller who shared their experiences and how it has been delivering to them. And I mean, the platform we created was a friendly platform which we allowed every opinion to be heard constructively without criticism, and that sort of gave the farmers and the city representatives and other stakeholders we invited freedom of speech, where they were able to hear their opinion, and which in the long run does not only ensure that the voices were heard, but also facilitated experience sharing among the farmers as to what has worked and what is working and what challenges they are facing in this process. Yeah.
Thanks, Elujulo. And I'll move on from that. I think that's a really great point actually for you to end on too, of having this platform where everyone is heard and there is no kind of judgment. It's about bringing people together to hear what their experiences are. Chemukue, what about you in coastal Kenya with the Mikenda community? Who did you bring together in your dialogue, and what were you trying to achieve?
Thank you, Sofie, again for the opportunity. We have been working with the Michikenda community for the last 10 years or so, promoting indigenous food crops and traditional crop varieties for the main staple crops that are cultivated within the landscape. This is upon realization that these crops are more resilient and to climate change, and they have also health benefit. They are able to address health crises within the community. And because of the multiple benefits of this indigenous food system, we decided to hold a dialogue with the policymakers from Kilifi and Mombasa counties. Remember, agriculture is a devolved function handled by county governments, which are equivalent to regional governments. It's no longer a national government function. So all decisions are made at a regional level by respective county governments. The main objective of the dialogue was to promote this indigenous food system and also the biocultural heritage model that we are trying to pilot within the Michikenda community. And this model is a landscape approach of managing people's resources, the landscape, that brings together agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and other natural resources within that particular landscape. And also is led by the local communities themselves with their own governance structure, which they have put in place. So the dialogue created a platform for us to share with the policymakers the indigenous food system that is being practiced by the local community, how important it is in helping the community adapt to climate change and also reduce the impact that agriculture, the conventional agriculture usually have on our climate. The other thing was also to promote the concept of biocultural heritage model that we are piloting and we intend to register in the next few months or a year to come through other initiatives. And during these dialogues, we got agriculture officials from Mombasa City County and the Kilifi County. We had indigenous farmers. We had the Kaya elders who are responsible for the governance and stewardship of the landscape. We had also a National Museum of Kenya, which is a key player in managing the Kaya sacred forest areas, and also the Department of Environment from the two counties and also from national government through National Environmental Management Authority. And the dialogues were held in one of the cultural villages that has been set up by the local community to just have a feel how heritage, culture, traditional knowledge, agriculture, and natural resources can interact in a more friendly manner to ensure there is harmony between nature and people with little footprints to the environment. We made that decision to create that conducive environment to allow everyone to speak out without being victimized or without being judged. And to add on that, we ensured that during the dialogues, we promote our traditional foods by having traditional recipes that the community could prepare and serve for tea break and also lunch to the policymakers and also other participants so that they can appreciate what we are talking about. And the communities were able to share their farming system, their challenges, and what they require, the kind of support they require from the policymakers to ensure that the model of promoting indigenous food systems can succeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Chemukue. Really exciting. And I just want to do a shout out of how the local dialogues each produced recipe cards ahead of COP26 that tell a story of what they were talking about, and also give you the chance to try some of this food that Chemukue was just talking about, not just from this region, but from many other places. So we'll share a link to those as well. Returning to you, Abby, we've got a couple more minutes before we have to dive into our activity. I was really excited to hear from you after COP how your Southwest Scotland dialogue is turning into the Southwest Scotland Regenerative Farmers Group. Can you tell us a bit more about how that happened and what that's going to be?
Yeah. So like I said, the two farm walks really were the kind of, I mean, all the sessions were good and all the sessions were full of kind of exciting people and great ideas, but this doesn't, in real life, just tops all of that. And having got an opportunity to go and see and share best practice that's actually happening in front of you is, you just can't beat that, I don't think. And there's definitely a need for it in this area particularly. I speak to a lot of farmers in this area, traditional beef cattle farmers who are just like, oh, you know, I would do that, but that won't work on my farm. But you know, it might be that somebody else just down the road is doing exactly the same thing, or so yeah, having opportunities to go and look at what's happening in real life and in practice. So, for example, at Auchincairn, at Tor Organic Farm, they have had a sort of hedgerow planting sort of project going on for about 20 years, maybe more than that. And they also sort of transformed their farm from their father's quite conventional approach to sort of like, okay, let's try and maximise productivity and yield out of this, what is meant to be quite a rough hillside, and work really hard at kind of, cutting the trees back and keeping the scrub out, etc., etc. And what Ross and Lee, who are brother and sister sort of duo there, did was kind of go, well, let's not do that. Let's just put the cattle on there, sort of sporadically for sort of, a couple of weeks at a time, and do sort of more of a conservation grazing kind of project. And that's worked really well. And kind of looking at sort of biodiversity loss, and how, just stepping back away from the margins can help to encourage farmland birds to kind of, re-nest and find their homes. So having these opportunities for farmers to go and look at this stuff in practice, you just can't beat that. So I think what we wanted to do from here onwards was really to sort of work with the farmers that have engaged with the process so far, but also reach out to other farmers across the region and across the communities here, and kind of go, okay, well, come on, let's go and have a look. Let's walk and talk and share our problems, share our issues, and share our solutions at the same time. So in the last few weeks before the end of the year there, we put out a few press releases and a couple of surveys, and we've managed to bump up that list of kind of interested farming folk to about 80 now, which is pretty exciting. And included on the survey was like tell us some farms that you'd like to go and visit. So yeah, we're going to be organising a programme over the next year. I've just managed to get a little bit of funding to support this project as well, which is great. We want to be able to pay the farmers for their hosting time, to sort of pay for food, for catering, and to make travel expenses available, because this is a big region. Southwest Scotland is huge. Dumfries and Galloway alone is 100 miles from northwest, east to west, and 80 miles from north to south. So that's just D&G. We're a huge area, and pretty diverse area. Lots some upland, there's some lowlands, quite a lot of forestry. So yeah, making the travel expenses available so folk can get from A to B easily as well. That's a bit of an incentive. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of that. We haven't embarked on this yet. It's on my to-do list for early this year, is to kind of look at those survey results and work out a sort of programme and start talking to different farms and farmers and say, look, can we go and have a look? What have you got to show us? But really the aim is to look at things like sort of increased biodiversity, good soil, soil carbon sequestration, regenerative farming practices, conservation grazing, that kind of thing. And I think one of the other sort of outcomes that we're looking at is increasing fruit and vegetable production in the region. So yeah, there's a few of us. I run a market garden here at Altamore Holding. There's a few other market gardens across the region. So looking at kind of upscaled vegetable production systems for Southwest Scotland, and what does that look like in practice? So yeah, there's a whole range of different topics that we're hoping to cover.
Excellent. It'll be exciting to follow. And I think, again, we're in that thing of, bringing people together, and then from there growing a collective voice that can come back into to our advocacy as well, and say, well, look at what farmers are actually doing on the ground. There are kind of different levels of where this work needs to take place. Super inspiring. Thank you so much, everyone. Abby, there was one question for you in the chat, but I have to hand over to Deanna. So if you don't mind answering Stephanie in the chat, that would be amazing. And thank you so much, Elujulo, Abby, Chemukue. Please stay and join the activity that Deanna will introduce in a minute. And then I think without further ado, I'll hand over to Deanna. But just a quick note for everyone on the call, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, because we'll get a bit more interactive now. Say hello to the speakers, to each other. Feel free to turn on your camera and so on. Okay, over to you, Deanna.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much to the panel. That was really interesting. It's always really nice to hear how the dialogues happened in practice. So, well, as Sofie said, my name is Diana, and I work with Nourish Scotland. And throughout the past year, I was part of the group supporting the dialogue facilitators from all over the world to run their dialogues, to learn from them, and then to also think about what it was that we wanted to take to COP and to show to everyone else. So I'm just gonna give a bit of a background on some things, and then we'll jump into some activities. So as mentioned, the Fork to Farm dialogues at the core are about relationship building. And we wanted this approach to guide all of the different aspects of how we were running the project at Nourish. So we put together a community of practice, which was co-led by Garduno Scotland, which is an organization that uses games for community buildings, and by Nourish Scotland. So the idea was that dialogue facilitators from all over the world came together every 2 weeks and got to know each other. So the community of practice was a space that modeled this relationship building process, where we understood relationship building as a continuously emerging outcome of diverse forms of interactions. So by what I mean by that is that when we're forming relationships, it's not something that you meet someone, you say hi, and then that's it. But it's a continuous process that you need to care for and that you need to put energy to. So what we were doing in this community practice was having this process of getting to know each other, and getting to know each other as people, and like how Elujulo was saying, getting to know about each other's positions, so about each other's experiences, by sharing our fears, our concerns, our dreams, etc. Because we think that understanding each other's positions and experiences enables us to work together from a place of informed complexity, rather than simplified understandings of what we believe that other people's situations are. And we also think that this relationship building is a form of a decolonial approach. And I say this because relationship building is inherently decolonial, because colonization was and continues to be a process of severing relationships between and within ourselves and with everything around us. So colonization or coloniality can be understood as a process where a person or a group of people believes that they hold the truth, that they are right, and that the way that they know how to do things is the only right one. So in a way, I see colonization as not allowing yourself to be transformed through meaningful relationships with others. So a meaningful relationship building process is about being open to change yourself as you interact with others. And so that's what we kind of wanted to do with the approach and with the methods that we were using. So today we've been really lucky to hear from the three speakers, and they were telling us how they were building relationships in their own different local contexts. But as you heard, there's also 13 other people who were doing this around the world. And so for anyone who's not here today, and if you want to learn more about these dialogues and the methods and these approaches, we are creating a resource pack to support people to run their own Fork to Farm local dialogues. So if you're inspired by this and you feel like you want to start this sort of food and climate conversations wherever you are, this resource pack will support you to do that. And this resource pack draws a lot from that community of practice, the learning that we had there. And so that's why I was mentioning it before, just so you know where the knowledge is also coming from. The pack will contain podcasts and photographs and videos, and it will have a range of tools and activities designed to support relationship building to work towards just and sustainable food systems. And I think it's really important to say that the pack is meant to reflect the diversity of local contexts and the way in which dialogues took place in the different areas, and what worked in some contexts and what didn't work in others. And so the tools and the methods and approaches in this pack won't be something that you copy and paste into a bunch of different places and it works, but it will more be a set of methods and approaches that each community can shape for themselves in a way that is relevant to them in their local context. And so we expect this pack to be available in early March. So if it's something that you're interested in and that would like to hear more about, Ross will pop a link in the chat. Thank you, Ross. We coordinated that. So you can just leave your email there and we will be happy to send you this pack so you can learn from it if you're interested in. So just having introduced that, we're now going to do something a bit more fun. Not that the other thing was not fun, but just me talking for a long time was probably not that fun. So something a bit more interactive. And if I can, Ross, can I get you to remove the spotlight from me? just so we can see at least the names of people. And the idea, Sofie, I hope you are ready, is that we're gonna go into breakout rooms of 4 people. And we're going to ask you, so we're gonna do some of the activities that are in the resource pack. And we're going to ask you to go into these rooms, and you are forbidden to ask each other what you work in, what you do, what your job title is, or any other like form of like way that you can think of asking that question. So just don't ask what other people work in. And we invite you to ask anything else. If you already know the person, try to ask something else, something new that you can learn from them. In the community of practice, for example, we once had a very long conversation about the kind of shoes that we preferred for 15 minutes, and people had a lot of fun and they learned a lot from each other. So just think about, we encourage you to have fun, to ask something else, and just for 5 minutes, then we'll come back and we're gonna move on to another activity. So Sofie, if I can ask you to open the breakout rooms, and we'll come back at 10. Hi everyone, thanks for doing that. It's nice to see some faces coming back. So I'm just gonna invite someone to share anonymously, if you want, something that you learned about the other person. Who wants to go? Just unmute yourselves and go for it. And just do it anonymously, so.
Hi everyone, good morning. So I had, unfortunately, I didn't catch her name properly, but I talked to a lovely lady from Oxford, and we were a bit stuck in what is it that we're supposed to talk. I think it's Nick. What is it that we're supposed to discuss? And we didn't want to, in a way, broke the rules, but we did discuss about the food and farming, which was interesting. And I think we did find out that both of us were interested in food and farming. In short, I would say something like that.
Nice, thank you, Dina. So if anyone else wants to share in the chat just a bit what they talked about. And this is really just to have different kinds of conversations. And for example, Daryl, I think apparently we met in COP. Hopefully, I don't know. But he actually told me about, I asked him if he had pets, and he told me that he had 40 cows. And then I learned about his favorite cow and the relationship he had with his cow. And I saw a picture of the cow. So now I also feel attached to the cow. So basically. So yeah, that's just to have a different kind of conversation and see what you can learn from it. So thanks for taking part in that. And now we're gonna do something a little bit longer. So the next activity is really about having these different kinds of conversations and really trying to go deeper in the kind of conversations that we have. And so as I'm sure you've all experienced, sometimes we're part of conversations where maybe it feels like nothing is really being said, or you feel like there could be something more to it. Or sometimes maybe something is said and there is a disagreement, but you don't really understand why people have different approaches, and it's just kind of left like that. And you're just left feeling uncomfortable, or you have that feeling, like 2 weeks after, where you're like, I should have said that. So just those situations that I'm sure we've all been in at some point. And a lot of the time, there are many historical, cultural, and personal issues that are going on in the background that lead to these conversations and that influence how these conversations are actually happening. So in the Fork to Farm community of practice, we used Arnold Mindell's 3 dimensions of reality theory, which I'll share and explain in a bit. And it's something that we found quite useful. And I'll just share my screen with you. So this is the diagram that explains it. And the idea is that at any moment, in any conversation, in any interaction that you have, there's 3 different levels of reality that are taking place. So there's at the surface, there's consensus reality, and those are the things that we can broadly agree on, that we can say, for example, we are all here at the Oxford Real Farming Conference, we're using Zoom, we're interested in food and climate. So they're like the things at the surface that we can say we're here talking about farmers and food. That's something that we can broadly agree on in the consensus reality. Under the consensus reality, there's dreamland, and dreamland is the place of feelings, emotions, dreams, history, body experience. So these are all the things that are also going on all the time whenever we're interacting. So for example, what am I don't know, maybe I'm also cultural experience and stuff like that. So now I might be, maybe I'm a bit aware of my accent and I'm wondering, oh, are people hearing my accent? Are they wondering where I'm from? And then this somehow pops up into the consensus reality. Or my body's feeling tired, I didn't sleep that well. So then this also comes, I see Abby like rolling your eyes, I guess. Tired, exactly. So being tired, all of these different things that really influence how we're relating at a consensus level, but a lot of the time we don't talk about. So if I'm feeling tired, it might be showing up in the consensus reality level, but the other person might not know that I'm tired. So they might just think, oh, they don't like me or something like that. And at the essence, and then there's the essence level at the end. And so this is just the idea, this is the third deepest level. And it's, for some people, it might be a spiritual experience or a religious experience, but just this idea that we're part of something bigger, that it's not just us individuals, but how we it's difficult to put into words, and that's part of it, but it's like an atmosphere that can permeate the other levels of reality. So that's the idea, that there's three different levels of reality. They're all happening at the same time. We usually tend to focus on the consensus one, the one that we called real or objective, and we don't really talk about our feelings, our emotions, our dreams, our history, or our body experience. So the idea with this diagram is that when we have these conversations where it feels like something was left unsaid or uncomfortable or there was a disagreement, is that if we explore these other levels of reality, if we go to the feelings, if we go to the emotions, to the dreams, we might be able to have different kinds of conversations in the consensus level. So whenever we have, as Abby was saying, for example, with the vegan and the farmers argument, this like different antagonizing perspective that at consensus level you might come with, this is my idea of why we shouldn't eat meat, or like, this is my idea of why we should. And you just stay there. You're unlikely to get anywhere. But if you begin exploring, like, oh, I saw someone in the chat saying, well, but actually this land might only be better for meat production. And then someone might say, oh, but then how are we actually doing this in a way that actually deals with animal welfare, et cetera, no? So you can really dive deeper into these conversations. And this is actually a tool that I found really useful in my day-to-day conversations, really with any kind of relationship. I stop and I think, okay, what is acting up for me right now? Where is this feeling coming from? Why am I responding in this way? So we really wanted to use this session to give a practical tool that might be useful for you into how to have deeper conversations from now on. So I'm gonna ask you all to get that piece of paper and pen that hopefully you got at the beginning. If not, you can run for it now. And I'm just gonna ask you to think about a recent interaction with another person that might be related to the food system in some way if you want. If not, that's completely fine. And think about a recent interaction that felt uncomfortable or unsatisfactory in some way, something that felt a bit off. Now begin writing what the issues, the general issues around the topic were. So think widely, include issues of sexism, racism, homophobia, climate change, emotions, anything big that was present, even if you maybe didn't talk about it. So now draw a diagram or a picture of the different people that were present in this interaction. Little stick figures will do, whatever you want to do. And once your stick people are ready, think about consensus reality. So that very top layer of reality that we were talking about. At the very top, on the surface level, what were people talking about? and write that down. Okay, so now take a few moments to remember what the interaction felt like when you were there. Look at your diagram and consider, were people actually addressing each other, or were they talking to something else, an absent figure? For example, were they talking to you, or were they talking to the government? And that wasn't there, but you know, a lot of the time those conversations happen. What was the atmosphere like, and what might have created it? What feelings were you experiencing, and why? These questions are in the chat also, if I'm going too fast. And also think about what feelings were the other people might have been experiencing. And also think about what wasn't said. And this might be from your side, or maybe something you noticed from the other people or person. And now think about, if you were completely free to say or do anything in that situation, what would you have said or done? And also think about, why didn't you? What stopped you? Okay, so I hope that was useful in some way. Maybe it gave you some insight into thinking about the different levels of reality and the different things that are going on. And we're gonna put you in breakout rooms again with the same people that you just chatted about, so you can keep chatting about beetroots or whatever it is that. No, Sofie?
There has been too many changes of people. There will be some of the same people, but there's been some people dropping out, some people coming in, so they might be new.
Amazing. So you're going to meet new people, which is very exciting. And now share, and we ask you to share a bit about this. Yeah, just share what this going through this activity was like for you. You can share the actual, the experience that you had, what you would have said, and you can also share if you didn't think it was useful, whatever came up for you in this activity. And we'll come back in 5 minutes, I think.
Okay, room should be open. Everyone, you should have a room open for you to join. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had people with you in your breakout room. Somebody came back to me and said no, so.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, it looks like we've lost a few people, but that's always the case. So thanks for doing that. And I just want to invite anyone who wants to share maybe a bit about the activity, a bit about an experience that they've had, anything that they want to share about these like deeper conversations.
We're quite a small group now, so feel free to unmute and jump in or use the chat.
I'll say something. Because we were just discussing the fact that it was a very uncomfortable process, and how useful that is to go through that discomfort. Because you know, when you first started telling me or telling us what we were going to do, I sort of didn't want to do it. Yeah. And then when you told us why it would be why, you know, how we have these this sort of colonial thinking process, and how we have to change the way that we interact with one another, that when you said that, I thought, right, okay, I can see the point of this. I've got to do this. This is really important. And so I did it. And I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that it was hard.
Thank you, Julie. And it definitely is really hard. It is really hard to to go through these different levels. So thank you for sharing that, and thanks for going through with it, even though it felt a bit uncomfortable at first, or a lot uncomfortable. But well, thanks for going through with that. And again, if it's something that you didn't find useful, that's also completely okay. Not everything is meant to be for everyone, so not a problem. But I do want to just share one last one last thing, which I learned during COP, and Elujulo also taught me a bit more about this. But I heard from in one of the speaking sessions, there was a woman who was from Nigeria, and she was telling us how in the Yoruba tradition, there is a concept that no one can ever have 100% of like knowledge. So in a lot of westernized ways of thinking about education, for example, in PhD, if you do a PhD, then you are the person who knows everything about that, no? And you are like the expert. So this concept, what this concept says is that you can never be like the expert. You can never have that like 100% knowledge. Like the max that you can have is like 50%. And then the idea is that whenever you meet someone, they will have the rest. So it is like a concept like this of like humbling ourselves to enabling ourselves to be transformed through relating with others and through this relationship building process. So yeah, so that's part of why we did that. And yeah, so just to say, the resource pack will be sent around. It will be on our website. And if someone feels like running a Fork to Farm dialogue, we would be really happy to hear from them and to support you in any way, in the sense that we've done this before. So we're happy to share knowledge and experience. Yes, thanks for us. The link to request the pack is in the chat again, so you can link to that. And I just, really want to thank all of our speakers today, Chemukue, Abby, Lina, Elujulo, for joining us today, Sofie for moderating, and Sofie, if you want to say some last things maybe.
Just to say, because we're being cut up, I think, in 2 minutes. So just a big thanks. Thanks, Diana, as always, for guiding us through this activity. And just to say that Nourish Scotland also has a booth in the conference platform if you want to get in touch about anything or ask any questions or get directions to any resources and you didn't follow the link, just reach out to us there. Yeah, so just big thanks to everyone, and thanks for joining us for one of the first sessions of the conference.
Yeah, thank you so much. Lovely to meet you, and good luck with these uncomfortable processes that we're going through. No, because I'm going through them too.
Great, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Brilliant. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
For the conference.
Bye-bye.